Mr David Davis.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Listening to the Minister winding up in the last debate, he made a reference to volunteering your mucker for the guard room. I hope my entire speech doesn't read like that for the Secretary of State. It's not intended to be. Every couple of years, Whitehall, like an overexcited teenager expecting a new mobile phone, becomes fixated with data. Most recently, the power of big data mining, and I'm sure not just under the influence of Mr Dominic Cummings. The Department of Health wants to open our GP medical records, 55 million data sets or thereabouts, to pharmaceutical companies, universities and researchers. Managed properly, that data could transform, innovate and help overcome the great challenges of our time, like cancer, dementia and diabetes. These are proper and worthwhile ambitions in the national interest, and I have little doubt that that was the government's aim. But this data is incredibly personal, full of facts that may harm or embarrass the patient if they were leaked or misused. Psychiatric conditions, history of drug or alcohol abuse, sexually transmitted infections, pregnancy terminations, the list is extensive. Revealing this data may not be embarrassing for everyone, but it could be life-destroying for someone. Unfortunately, in keeping with the Department of Health's long history of IT failures, the rollout of this programme has been something of a shambles. The government has failed to explain exactly how it will use the data, failed to say who will use the data, and failed to say, most importantly, how it will safeguard this treasure trove of information. The government describes the data as pseudonymised. This is because it's impossible to fully anonymise medical records, a fact well understood by experts in the field. Even pseudonymised, anyone could be identified if someone tried hard enough. Take, for example, Tony Blair, who was widely known to have developed heart condition, supraventricular tachycardia, in October 2003. He was first admitted to Stoke Mandeville and then rushed to Hammersmith. 1 year later, in September 2004, he again visited Hammersmith for a corrective operation. Even the name of the cardiologist is public record. A competent researcher would make very short work of finding individual records like this in a mass database, and that cannot be for the public good. Moreover, the government seems to be intending to keep hold of the keys to unlock the entire system and identify an individual if the state felt there was a need to do so. I will very briefly, because we've got a little more time. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, can I congratulate all of the gentlemen bringing this forward? I've been inundated with the same concern from many of my constituents. Does the honourable gentleman, right honourable member, agree with me that a system which allows a diversion from the court-appointed warrant to collect information is a dangerous precedent in the terms of the judicial due process, and we must ensure that anyone that opts out is completely opted out as is promised?
The point, and I'll actually elaborate on it as I make progress. Now, as presented, this plan is to collect the data first and think about the problem second. And the information is too important and the department's failed IT record too great to be trusted carte blanche with our privacy. There's also the so-called honeypot problem. Data gathered centrally inevitably attracts actors with more nefarious intentions. The bigger the database, the greater the incentive to hack it. If the Pentagon, the US Department of Defense, and even Microsoft have been hacked by successful cyber attacks, what chance does our National Health Service have?
Order. As we're coming towards 5 o'clock, I think I'll just go through the technical process of saying the question is that this House do now adjourn Mr David Davies to continue his speech.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I take it you don't want me to start from the beginning again, but it might test people's patience a little. But as I was saying, if the sort of giants of data security can be hacked, what chance the National Health Service? Big databases and big systems are intrinsically vulnerable. In 2017, a ransomware attack brought parts of the NHS to its knees. Trusts were forced to turn away patients and ambulances were diverted and 20,000 operations cancelled. These highlight significant problems the government has yet had time to address. And yet, despite these problems, the government is determined to press ahead regardless with its data plans. It undertook no widespread consultation, provided no easy opt-out, and showed no particular willingness to listen as would be proper with such an important move. The public was given little over a month to opt out of a data grab that few knew existed. The plan was described by the BMA as a complete failure and completely inadequate. Now, the government's riding roughshod over our privacy was only halted when a coalition of organisations, including Digital Rights Campaign Group Foxglove, the Doctors Association UK, the National Pensioners Convention, and myself, Mr. Deputy Speaker, challenged the legality of the state's actions. Our letter before legal action and threat of injunction forced a delay of 2 months. Now, this is a welcome pause, but it's not resolved the issue. Earlier this week, the government published their draft data strategy. The Secretary of State published the draft data strategy that raised the possibility of using health data to improve care, something I know is close to his heart. But plans for securing and handling our data were consigned to a single paragraph, almost an afterthought. If the government does not take corrective action to address our concerns, there will inevitably be a full judicial review, and I have no doubt that without clear action both to protect the privacy and give patients control of their own data, the government will find itself on the losing side of any legal case. Now, today, I hope and I believe that the government will have the courtesy to listen. Indeed, if I may, I'll thank the Secretary of State for being here personally today. It's very, very unusual that the Secretary of State takes time out of it. Well, he must be the most busy man in government, and that he takes time to address this today is I think, a compliment to him, frankly, that he's doing this. A comprehensive health database undoubtedly has the potential to revolutionise patient treatment and save hundreds of thousands of lives. However, this data grab is not the correct approach. There are much better, safer and more effective ways to do this in the national interest. No system's ever going to be 100% safe, but it must be as safe as possible. We must find the proper balance between privacy and progress, research and restrictions, individual rights and academic insights. And this also means controlling the companies we allow into our health system. Patient trust is vital to the National Health Service, so foreign tech companies like Palantir, with their history of supporting mass surveillance and assisting in drone strikes, immigration raids and predictive policing, must not be placed at the heart of our NHS. We should not be giving away our most sensitive medical information lightly under the guise of research to huge companies whose focus is profits over people. Of course, this was not Whitehall's first attempt at a medical data grab. The failed care.data programme was the most notorious attempt to invade our privacy. Launched in 2013, NHS Digital's project aimed to extract data from GP surgeries into a central database and sell the information to third parties for profit. NHS Digital claimed the data was going to be anonymised, not realising that this was actually impossible. The Cabinet Office described the disaster as having major issues of project definition, schedule, budget, quality and or benefits delivery, which at this stage do not appear to be manageable or resolvable. The project was ended in July 2016, wasting $8 million before it was scrapped. But care.data was just one example. I'm afraid the department has a long and problematic history with IT. Before care.data, the NHS National Programme for IT was launched by Labour in 2003. It sought to link more than 30,000 GPs to nearly 300 hospitals with a centralised medical record system for 50 million patients. The initial budget of $2.3 billion, note billion, not million, ballooned to $20 billion, which had to be written off when the programme collapsed in 2011. And my old committee, the Public Accounts Committee, described the failed programme as one of the worst and most expensive contracting fiascos ever. The possibilities to make research more productive, quicker and more secure are goals worth pursuing. There's no doubt we all agree on the aims, but the path to progress must be agreed on. And there is clear concern amongst the public, GPs and professional bodies about this new data system. I give way to the Honourable Lady for York.
I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman, not only for giving way, but in leading today's very important debate. It's been a really difficult year, both for clinicians and the public who understand the importance of research and planning, but they need confidence that their data, often about very intimate health needs, is secure. In order to maintain that special relationship between the clinician and the patient, does he agree that the insufficiency in the current processes will damage that relationship, and therefore we need a complete rethink about how data is collected and then used appropriately?
I do absolutely agree with it indeed, and I think there is a common interest, frankly, between everybody in this House, including the front bench. The worst thing that happened to this is the failure of trust. And the failure of public trust in the care.data system saw some 2 million people opt out. And that's not what we want to see here. We could easily exceed that figure with this proposal, this programme now. A lack of trust will undermine the usefulness of the data set the government hopes to collect. I mean, The Guardian reported, I think last week, all 36 doctors' surgeries in Tower Hamlets have already agreed to withhold the data had the collection gone ahead on July the 1st as was planned. Other parts of the country are seeing more than 10% of patients withdraw their data via their GP surgery, and that's with little to no public awareness campaign. Much of this would have been avoided had the government trusted Parliament and the public with a detailed and carefully thought through plan. As the BMA noted, rushing through such fundamental changes to confidential healthcare data, losing the confidence of the public and the professions, will severely undermine the programme and threaten any potential benefits it can bring. They are entirely correct. Now, despite the errors so far, this proposal need not necessarily be consigned to the ash heap of NHS history. There are ways of safely achieving the vast majority of what the government wants. Open Safely is, the programme Open Safely is a new analytics platform principally authored by Dr. Ben Goldacre, Liam Smith and Seb Bacon, and was created during the pandemic to provide urgent data insights. So I know the Health Secretary will be very familiar with it. Working with 58 million NHS records distributed across a range of databases, not centralised, on a range of databases, their software maintains health data within the secure systems it was already stored on. It's not transported outside the existing servers, and it does not create a central honeypot target. The programme sees the data, but the researcher does not. Furthermore, all activity involving the data is logged for independent review. The researcher, the way it works is the researcher sets up the experiment and the programme returns the results, such as a hypothesis test, a regression analysis, or an associational graph. At no point does the researcher need to see the raw data, raw patient data. They simply see the outcome of their own experiment. Now, this is very important because the biggest risk with any new data system is losing control of data dissemination. Once it's out, like Pandora's box, you can't close the lid. Open Safely, therefore, gets us 80 to 90% of the government's objectives, 89% of the way there, but operated under rigorous access controls, it could give the vast majority of research benefit with very little risk to the security of the data. Therefore, this is a viable approach, providing there's a properly thought-through opt-out system for patients. This approach has so far been severely lacking. Where are the texts, the emails and the letters to the patients which should have been there at the beginning? On the Today programme earlier this week, the Health Secretary indicated he was now willing to contact every patient. This is very welcome, and I hope he's now writing to every single patient involved in this proposed database and informing them properly. That information should be in easy to understand English or other community language, not technical jargon. Everything in the letter must be easily verifiable, clear facts for clear choices. The letter should have the approval of the relevant civil organisations who campaign on privacy and medical data issues to give the letter credibility. And unlike the disastrous scenes of only a few weeks ago, this would mean that patients should be able to opt out through their choice of a physical form with a prepaid return or an easily accessible form online or simple notification of their GP. As well as the physical letter, there should be a reminder sent to them shortly before their data is accessed, which again should give the patient a clear way to change their mind and opt out. The overall aim must be to give the patients more control, more security, and more trust in the process, and that requires very high levels of transparency. However, my understanding is the government wants to go further than this 80 or 90% that we could do it absolutely safely. The government wants to allow, I think, partial downloads of data sets by researchers, albeit under trusted research environment conditions. Now, it may go even further and wish to train AIs in this area or allow outside third-party companies to do so. In my view, that is a bridge too far. One of the country's leading professors of software security told me just this week that it's difficult to ensure that some designs of AI will not retain details of individual data. The simple fact is that at the moment, AI is a digital technology with effectively analog oversight. Other researchers argue for other reasons they need to have more direct access to the data. And again, as I understand it, the government's response is downloading partial samples of those databases under the control of technology. It will track the researchers' every click, keystroke and action and take screenshots of what their computer shows at any point in time. I am afraid I'm unpersuaded of the security of this approach. Downloading any of these databases, even partially, strikes me as being a serious risk. The stark fact is that whether it be data downloads, AI or other concerns we are not yet aware of, there are significant ethical and risk implications. If the government wants to go beyond what is just demonstrably safe and secure, an opt-out system is not sufficient. In this scenario, the database would only be viable as an opt-in system. Volunteers, if you like, Mr. Deputy Speaker, people who are deciding they are happy that their data is used in a system which is perhaps not perfectly secure. The risk is too great to work on the presumption of consent that an opt-out system has. And the government must make these risks of exposure and privacy absolutely clear to those willing to donate their data. However, it's obvious that an opt-in system is going to be significantly constrained by to give a much smaller data sample. But that's the only way we should countenance such risks. So my strong recommendation to the Secretary of State is that the government pursues the first stage properly with a closed technology like open safety that can provide proper security, proper access for researchers and proper reassurance to the public. There is no doubt this is a complex issue. However, it would be a dereliction of our duty if this House did not hold the government to account on what could have been and could still be a colossal failure. Whether it intended it or not, the Department of Health has given us the impression it did not take the privacy and security of our personal health records sufficiently seriously. This is extremely damaging to the government's cause, which I have no doubt is well-meaning. The Department needs to explain to the House how it will address the legitimate concerns and safeguard this most sensitive of personal data. Only by properly respecting the privacy of the citizen and by obtaining freely given informed consent can the Department deliver on its prime purpose, which must be enhancing the health of the nation, something I know is absolutely close to the Secretary of State's heart.
Secretary of State.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I've come to the House today to answer this debate because of the importance of the subject matter and because of the importance of getting this right. And I recognise and acknowledge the checkered history that my right honourable friend described. And I see that checkered history as one of the reasons that the NHS does not yet have the modern data architecture that it needs. Because previous attempts, both the National Programme for IT and care.data, have failed in the past, and so people have shied away from tackling this problem in a modern, secure and agile way. And I have come to demonstrate and to argue that there is no contradiction between high-quality security and privacy within the data held within a health system and the use of that data in order to save lives, because in a well-structured, well-thought-through system, both are enhanced. I profoundly believe that. I think that my right honourable friend does too. And I agree with him when he said that we agree on aims, the key is the path. And I agree with him too that the proper use of data has the potential to save hundreds of thousands of lives if we use it as safely as possibly, but also allow for the insights in the data to be discovered in order to promote better healthcare, better discoveries, and the better operation of the NHS. And I think if you didn't believe that before, Mr. Deputy Speaker, then you could not fail to have been persuaded by that if you look at the experience of the last 18 months. We have discovered that an old, cheap drug, dexamethasone, helped to reduce the likelihood of you dying if you ended up in hospital with COVID, and as a result has saved around 1 million lives across the globe. And we discovered that within the NHS because of the data that we have and because of a well-structured, high-quality data architecture project to find that fact, to find out which drugs worked. We know that the NHS will operate better if different parts of it can compare their performance better. And we also know that patients want their data to be used better because the frustration expressed to me so frequently from patients who are asked over and over again, who are you and what's wrong with you, when that data should be available to the clinicians who need to see it, that frustration is palpable. And we know that the clinicians in the NHS want high quality use of data so that they don't waste so much time on outdated IT and so that they can treat the people in their care better. All of these things matter and they will save lives. The current GP data service, GPES, is over 10 years old and it needs to be replaced. And the project that my right honourable friend referred to, the GP data for planning and research, is there to unlock the intrinsic benefits of this data, but it must be done in a way that maintains the highest possible standards of security. The goal of this and the outcomes of this, when we get it right, and I say when, not if, is that it will reduce the bureaucracy and workload on GPs, it will strengthen privacy and security, and it will replace around 300 separate data collections with one single collection. And if I may take my right honourable friend back to 2018, I piloted through this House the Data Protection Act, in which we brought the GDPR into UK law and we strengthened provisions for data security. And you may remember it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because you might have received a few emails about it at the time. Companies asking if you're still happy for them to hold your data. And you could have replied at the time, no. And in fact, I got off quite a few lists that I was no longer interested in receiving the emails from because I was reminded that I was still on them and I could opt out. Now, I think the time has come for a similar approach, an update to the way that we think about health data in this country that puts security and privacy at its heart and in so doing unlocks the insights in that data and allows us to hold the trust of the citizens who we serve. And the way that I think about that is this. In the current law, it is considered that citizens do not control their health data, but that the NHS does. For instance, GP data is controlled by GPs. However, the approach we should take is that a citizen is in charge of their data. It is our data. The details of my bunion are a matter for me, and me primarily, and I won't have anybody in the NHS tell me whether I can or can't disclose the details of my bunion. It's going fine. Thank you very much for asking. But that matters. It matters to me, even though it is a completely uncontroversial health condition. But as my right honourable friend set out, for many people, their health data is incredibly sensitive, and it is vital that it is kept safe. So, turning to the question at hand, the programme, the GP data for planning and research, will be underpinned by the highest standards for safety and security. And I, like him, am a huge fan of the progress and the advances we've seen in trusted research environments. These are the safe, secure places for bringing together data where researchers can access the data, or more accurately, the insights in the data, whilst maintaining the highest standards of privacy. I too am an enormous fan of Dr. Ben Goldacre and his team, and the Open Safely project has shown the benefits that TREs can bring, because they allow us to support urgent research and to find the insights in the data whilst protecting its privacy. For instance, during the pandemic, it was absolutely fundamental to our response. In fact, it existed before the pandemic, but really came into its own during the pandemic. For instance, it was the first project to find risk factors, underlying risk factors for COVID-19. It was the Open Safely project that found around the world, was the first project to find, statistically significantly, that obesity makes it more likely that you'll die of COVID. That was a very important fact, and it was discovered through this project without disclosing anybody's body mass index in doing so. So this is the approach that we will take. And I can tell the Right Honourable Member and the House that I have heard the concerns people have about using dissemination of pseudonymised data. We will not use this approach in the new GPDPR. The new system will instead use trusted research environments. All data in the system will only ever be accessible through a TRE. And this means that the data will always be protected in the secure environment. Individual data will never be visible to the researcher, and will know and will publish who has run what query or used which bit of data. This was the questions asked: who has access to what data and who knows about it? The answer is that we should all know about it, and that people should have access in a trusted way, but they should have access to be able to find insights in the data, not to people's individual personalised data itself. I hope that this will help to build trust. It will mean a different way of operating for data researchers. But I disagree with my right honourable friend that this will allow us only to get 80 or 90% of the research benefit. I think that a well-structured TRE actually allows you to find more insight from the data, not least because the data could be better curated and therefore more people can spend more time building the finding the insights in the data rather than curating it over and over again. And the dangers that come with dissemination of pseudonymised data are removed. Now, it will take some time to move over to this new system, and hence I've delayed the introduction of the new system. But we've also made that delay to ensure that more people can hear about it. And that's the other reason that I came to the House today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I want people to be engaged in this project. People are engaged in their health like never before. People are engaged in their health data like never before, in part because of the pandemic. If you think about the NHS app, which no doubt is in your pocket, it's certainly in mine. If you think about the COVID app, been downloaded 25 million times. We have never seen more interest in between people and their health data. We've never seen a greater connection. And we should use this to make sure that consent, when it is given fully and properly. I can assure the House we have an extremely high benchmark for who can access data. We've put in place a rigorous and independent approvals process, and audits are carried out to make sure it's only being used for legitimate purposes. We'll make sure that the right data can be accessed by the right people at the right time, but only by the right people at the right time. And both sides of that it can be accessed by the people who need to see it, but only by the people who need to see it. This is critical to getting this right. If I can turn, Mr. Speaker, to the question of the giving of that consent. It is crucial that we ensure that there is enough knowledge and understanding of these changes that people are brought into the process. People know that they have an opt-out because the research is clear. The majority of people are keen to allow their data to be used to help to save other people's lives, but they want to know, and they are reassured if they are given an opt-out, even if they stay opted in, because then you know that it is based on your consent. So this important programme will have an opt-out system. We're strengthening the opt-out system already, and we will take the time to work with those who are enthusiastic about using data properly, with those who ensure that their questions of privacy and security are put to the fore, and with the public and of course with clinicians, to make sure that we strengthen this programme further in terms of its security and privacy, yes, but also in terms of the outcomes that we can get from the data, and so that we can find new treatments to help to save lives. This is an important programme. The use of data in the NHS will have a huge impact on the future of health and care in this country, and we want to take people with us on this mission. We've developed this policy together with doctors and patients and experts in data and privacy, and over 200 prominent scientific and medical researchers have endorsed a statement of support of this mission. But we've decided to take some extra time to consult further and to be even more ambitious about what we want to deliver, with a new implementation date of the 1st of September. One of the central lessons of the pandemic is that data makes a difference. So let's keep working on this to take it forward, learning the lessons of the crisis so we can build back better and use data to save lives.
And the Secretary of State's Bunyan notwithstanding, the question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Or the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order.